Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. I hope you all are fine. Today we are supposed to look into political system and state structure of Pakistan. This topic is kind of a moving target because of the fact that as long as we are concerned today, I mean as on date, the things which we are going to discuss they are valid. However, in near future or maybe after a few years or so, I mean one cannot predict the validity of those things which we have discussed here, it may vary with any new constitution amendment in Pakistan. In simple words, it's mean that today these practices are valid given that the current form of your constitution supports them. However, if there would be any constitutional amendment, which is quite normal, then in near future the procedures and practices which we are going to discuss in this slide and this lecture, they may shift. So as long as we are concerned with the this particular time and date in which we are discussing this lecture. Okay, coming towards the first one, in this political system and state structure, we'll try to learn how do you elect your president, prime minister, etc., etc. These are the certain procedures which we are going to look into. Head of the state, that is your president, basically since 18th and 19th amendment, which were initiated and formally passed during the last government of People's Party, the presidential post, it is basically considered as more or less as a ceremonial post. The procedure to elect the president is he is chosen by a secret ballot through an electoral college. The electoral college would be the bodies which would be eligible to vote for the president. Number one, members of Senate, your upper house. Number two, National Assembly, your lower house of the parliament. And number three, your provincial assemblies. A president has to be a Muslim, at least 45 years of age, and is qualified to be elected as the member of National Assembly. Then his term or her term would be for a period of 5 years, and he is authorized to appoint the Attorney General, judges of Supreme Court and High Courts, and the Chief Election Commission. However, bear in mind that all these appointments they are basically since the approval of 18th amendment and 19th amendment, president's authority over these appointments is ceremonial. Why is it so? Because of the fact that since then the procedures to appoint be it judges, chief election commission, and so it is given that there is more devolution of power, so it is in more hands, not in the hands of one individual, which used to be at least in the earlier history of Pakistan. If you have to remove a president or you have to start an impeachment means you have to do a trial of it, or you have to start some sort of inquiry or so. So for that particular activity, at least there should be one half of total membership of either house. By either house means either the lower house of the parliament or the upper house of the parliament. And it should be given in black and white. Black and white means in written form either to the Speaker of National Assembly or Chairman Senate. I mean, in whichever house this move for the removal of president or the impeachment of president would be taken, head of that particular house, it should be provided in written form. Then let's say if there is going to be a joint session of both houses, upper and the lower one, then at least two-third majority of the total membership should be in favor of the removal and impeachment and should back this sort of action. Coming towards the next one, for an individual to be head of the government, that is the Prime Minister of Pakistan and head of the executive, an individual has to be a Muslim, number one. Number two, he should be an MNA whose name should be proposed by another MNA, that is member of National. The nomination then has to be seconded by another MNA. That means that the candidate should have both a proposer as well as a seconder. Support and vote of confidence in the House. Usually, the party who wins the election and has more numerical superiority in the National Assembly, it secures the position of the Prime Minister as well. And in certain cases, if the winning party has no majority support, then it will have to go for a coalition government. In case of removal of the prime minister from the post, there should be at least 20% membership of the National Assembly who should favor this idea and then propose this no confidence motion against the prime minister. Then this prime minister of Pakistan is assisted by the federal cabinet, a council whose members are appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. The federal cabinet comprises upon the ministers of government and ministers of state as well as advisors. Coming towards the next one, this is your current representation of National Assembly as on March 30th, 2020. Here you can have a general idea of general seats of Punjab, then women seats. Similarly, you can witness number of seats which are allocated to Sindh, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, and Federal Capital, and then the total number of seats which have been allocated to the National Assembly Forum. The National Assembly is a body which is elected usually with for a period of 5 years. Its members are elected directly by universal adult franchise. The universal adult suffrage is the basic age limit after which a person is considered eligible enough to vote. So in case of Pakistan, that is the 18 years of age. And for all general seats, that is 272 general seats, the voting is done on the pattern of first past the post basis. This is also commonly known as single member plurality voting, which is basically means that the winner or the one candidate who would secure highest number of votes would be eligible to considered part of the National Assembly. Whereas in certain other parts of the globe, you will also find a proportional sort of voting patterns. Maybe I think it's valid in Ireland, Chile, etc. Places like that. Usually, there's always a debate about proportional method and the first past the post basis method. Proportional method, the people who are pro-proportional method, they proclaim that it give representation to even those votes or to those candidates which were given priority by the least number of the people. So in that particular case, when you are going to have the proportional method, then you would identify like n percentage of votes are secured by XYZ party or XYZ candidate, and then n percentage of the seats would be allocated to them. However, in case of Pakistan and in certain countries which remained colony of the British Raj, usually the first past the post basis is the prevalent method. Then the reserve seats for women and non-Muslim minority, as we have seen in the previous slide, which maybe you can find here. Like women, total number of women seats is 60 and 10 are allocated to the non-Muslim minority. So what happens in this case that both women and the minority representatives, they are allocated seats on the basis of proportional representation to those political parties which secure more than 5% of the directly elected seats. Usually the larger parties, they are able to secure more seats on the basis of their women quota. Then coming towards the next one, and that is your Senate formation as on March 30th, 2020. You can find that Senate is a body which gives equal representation to all provinces or all regions. So therefore, you will largely have like equal number of seats. The body remains intact for 3 years, and basically the pattern is that total out of 23 seats, 14 would out of 23 seats, half of them would be vacant and half of them would remain intact. So you will have after 3 years the elections of Senate, and that is the purpose to have a bicameral legislation, and this is kind of a body which always remains intact. One thing which you should have bear in mind is the fact that since the 25th Amendment to the Constitution of Pakistan, once the tenure of these FATA members, which are 8 in numbers, it would end, what will happen that at that time there would be no more FATA seats in the Senate, and the number of 104 total would reduce to 96 seats. Why? Because after 25th Amendment, as FATA has become part of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so their representation would come directly from the forum of that very province, the KP. So there were not additional seats to be represented here. Then coming towards the Senate of Pakistan, the body is basically comprised of equal representation from each of the four provinces of Pakistan. That makes 104 seats in total. However, you have to bear in mind that since the 25th Amendment to the Constitution of Pakistan, the seats of Senate have been reduced to 96. However, those FATA members which are currently serving, they would remain into their position as long as their tenure would end. The Senate members, they are elected by the members of their respective provincial assemblies. The chairman Senate is considered a very powerful post because of the fact in certain cases he had to act as an acting president in case the president is on some foreign visit or having any sort of unpredictable situation. In that case, he had to take the responsibilities of the president. Largely, we'll discuss the role of Senate and the National Assembly. Both of the houses, they can initiate or pass any legislation, but money bills are considered sole authority of the National Assembly. Why? It is generally considered that because of the fact that they are direct representative of the public, so they have the legitimacy to put any sort of taxes or so, something like that. So they are usually supposed to deal with the money bills. So in that particular case only, the National Assembly has a little superiority. Then if you look into the legislation process, both houses work together to legislate. That means that if one house would initiate some bill and would pass it through the majority vote, then it is transmitted to the other house, and once the house would approve it with or without amendment, then it would be forwarded to the president for the formal verification or assent. If the bill which is transferred to the other house is not passed within 90 days or is rejected, it is considered in a joint sitting of the parliament to be summoned by the president on the request of the house in which the bill originated. If the bill is passed in a joint sitting with or without amendments by the votes of majority of the members of the two houses, it is presented to the president for assent within 10 days. If the president would not provide the formal assent within 10 days, it is deemed that such consent has been already given. One more thing which is interesting to remember, that at least one-fourth membership of any house is essential to go through this entire legislation process, which we usually call it the quorum. Quorum means that at least, let's say it is the total membership of any house, for instance, is 100, then at least one-fourth of that number should be available there. In all bills, President may return the bill with reconsideration note in part or as whole and return the bill except the finance bill. So, which means that in the finance bills, the sole authority lies with the National Assembly and the other two bodies are supposed to be. Then there are certain other provisions which fall in the domain of Senate and National Assembly. Let's say that if there is state of emergency in any province, then legislative powers for that province would lie in the hands of Parliament. However, the validity period of any such legislation which would be done during the emergency period would be 6 months after the date on which emergency would be lifted. However, if the provincial assembly would like to continue with that legislation which was done initially, then it can do that. I mean, it can opt with that with a formal procedure of accepting any sort of legislation. At times, it may happen that the provinces they would demand that to do some sort of legislation or for their particular region. It can be any issue of national concern. For instance, the way you can have national concerns face in the wake of that child abuse activities and so. So, for two or more provinces, by consent given that such a request would initiate by those provinces, Senate and National Assembly, they can also legislate on their behalf. Then there's role of judiciary. This is the entire structure of legislative process of the National Assembly. You can have a look on it step by step. First of all, there would be a notice by a member. Then, if Speaker would allow and consider it that it's a subject which is legitimate enough to be part of the agenda, it will be added into the orders of the day. Then the third step is that it would be publicized in the Gazette. Then the 3A states the bill would be referred to the standing committee of whichsoever standing committee which would be relevant to that particular bill according to its nature. Then the secretary permits copies to all, that means to all who are concerned. Next stage, member puts forth motion under Article 124A, the one who is the initiator of the bill. He or she would put forth the motion. Then you will find that if any member would object that the bill under consideration is repugnant to Quran and Sunnah, then it will be sent to the Council of Islamic Ideology, the CII, for their opinion. After that, principals discuss in sitting committee. Bill would be considered. Then the committee would be selected. Elicit opinion of all members. They can have a confidential conversation about it. And then if any amendment is required, any member can call for it. At the next stage, it would be circulated among the lawmakers, and then second reading of the bill would be done clause by clause. By clause by clause, I mean like if every clause of the bill they have to read it. Amendments would be made if required. Then there would be third reading of the debating session. After that, House votes either to pass the bill or to reject the bill. If the bill has been initiated in the National Assembly, then it will move towards Senate. Otherwise, if it is initiated in the Senate, then after entire procedure in the National Assembly, it will move for the presidential authentication as well as assent, and then a bill becomes law and published in the Gazettes of Pakistan. Then coming towards the next one, which is your judiciary. Basically, the judicial system of Pakistan. It comprises upon the Supreme Court, which is headed by a Chief Justice and 16 judges. The nature of the judicial powers of the Supreme Court, it has three main domains: original jurisdiction, then appellate one, and then advisory jurisdiction. The advisory one is the sole authority of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. In addition to that, the other factions which constitute the other pillars of judiciary are provincial high courts, which can do original as well as appellate jurisdiction. Then there are lesser courts, which are part of this entire judicial system. The eligibility for the Chief Justice, that he should be either having 5 years tenure as a judge of High Court or at least 15 years experience as an advocate of High Court. Then there is Federal Sharia Court of Pakistan, which is also a strong pillar of Pakistan's judicial setup. It has 8 Muslim judges, including a Chief Justice appointed by the President, and 3 of them should be from the ulama cadres. One thing which is critical to be noted down here is the fact that the 18th and 19th constitutional amendments, these basically, when they lessened the power of president, so was his authority to appoint chief justices and so. Now, although presidents still carry that ceremonial authority, actually what happens that these amendments, they provide basis for Constitution of Judicial Commission of Pakistan and Parliamentary Committee. The Judicial Commission of Pakistan consists of Chief Justice as chairman, number one. Number two, 4 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court, plus one former Chief Justice or judge of the Supreme Court nominated by the chairperson in consultation with 4 member judges for a period of 2 years. It also includes the Attorney General of Pakistan as well as the Federal Law Minister and a senior advocate of Supreme Court of Pakistan, which would be nominated by the Pakistan Bar Council. That is the structure of the Judicial Commission, plus the second body, which is Parliamentary Committee. It should be of 8 members with equal membership from the opposition as well as the government benches. Plus, there should be equal representation from the National Assembly as well as Senate. The nomination of the members from government benches would be done by the leader of the House, that is Prime Minister, and from the opposition benches by the leader of the opposition. And one thing which should be taken care of that those members of Senate should be made part of it whose tenure would continue even if the National Assembly would dissolve. The procedure is that the Judicial Commission of Pakistan would nominate a name for the appointment for the judge of Supreme Court after doing necessary evaluation and having a look into the professional competency. Then recommendations of the Judicial Commission are sent to the Parliamentary Committee, and the committee, after receiving the nomination from the Commission, would either confirm by majority of its membership within 14 days. Otherwise, it would be considered that the nomination has been and it's confirmed. However, if the committee objects to it at least with three-fourth majority within the said period and forward it to the commission through Prime Minister, then the Judicial Commission will have to send another nomination. The committee then shall send the name of the nominee to the Prime Minister, who would forward it to the President. So the entire setup is not in the hands of President, but still it is the supreme, like it is the final authority. So it is largely considered that President has the authority. But as I stated in the very start, that presidential powers are more or less now ceremonial in Pakistan. So that is not an essential sort of authority which the president enjoy. Folks, that is the entire idea about the state as well as political structure of Pakistan. I mean, it's a bird eye view of certain things. If you have any query, you may ask in our online session. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.